This podcast, Strange, Rare, and Peculiar, is for kind of those in the know about homeopathy, deepening your knowledge, bringing you more information about what you need to know, and maybe what you can leave aside about homeopathy.
Homeo what?
Homeo what?
All right, my friends. Hello, good evening, and good afternoon.
Yo.
And yo.
Yo.
And
Feeling my Philly today.
Welcome to the strange and rare and peculiarness
Of homeopathy.
that is homeopathy. And I want to start by telling you about my adventures in the garden today.
Tell me.
I walked out of the door and I felt my little funny feet on the dewy grass.
Your funny little feet.
My funny little hobbit feet.
Uh-huh.
And then I just did a circumnavigation of the place. And my God, I have not grown sunflowers on account of a comment you made a number of years ago, which I totally misinterpreted. You're actually fine with sunflowers.
I love sunflowers.
Well, we got 100 gazillion bazillion, and there's another 2, 3, what's 3 times 18?
A lot.
50? I got another 50 to put in the ground.
54. Is that
54.
Right? 54.
Yeah, we got sunflowers up the wazoo.
I love them. The comment that I made was, I don't like when they're really messy. Like sometimes they get planted kind of catawampus and they just make a mess, but when they have to be integrated into the garden, and you've gotten really good at that.
Integrated and held up.
And held up. They need to be supported. Your dahlia supports. Can we discuss that for a second before we get to the homeopathy?
Sure.
Because I am all about this.
Right.
I happen to love dahlias, although your sweet sister Fiona does not. She does. Do we know why she does not like dahlias? No, but I like them. I like all kinds. I love that.
I mean, as a flower, they've been in and out of fashion. I know this from watching Monty Don.
Right, of course. But you, a couple of years ago, we went to this really amazing farm-to-table place in Cape May, New Jersey, and it was beautiful. They had farms and gardens, and there were ducks wandering around, and they had their garden beds were sort of, you would wander the grounds before this dinner experience, and you're wondering where all the food grows and the flowers. And they had this really incredible support system for the dahlias that you have executed.
Photographed, replicated, and executed.
It is so amazing.
Them dahlias are standing up straight and tall.
They really are. And actually, they're growing so much better because of that support.
I think so too. And there's a bit of competition because I put them slightly closer together than one might prefer. So there's also just a little bit of, what do you call it? Familial competition for the light. It's also much lighter around there. Thanks for saying that.
Oh, yeah, totally. Because I'm looking now at a bunch of them that I picked. I got to make a few really big floral arrangements yesterday. That was pretty exciting. Because in my fantasy life, I have a flower stall in Paris.
Say that again?
In my fantasy life?
Yeah.
I have a flower stall in Paris.
Did you have a sliding doors moment where you coulda, shoulda?
No. It never almost happened. No. Not even once.
There's still time. You would look really good smoking a gitan.
That's the thing. I'm going to smoke gitan, and I'm going to have the best shoes. Well, I have good shoes. I just don't have anywhere to wear them because I work at home. I need to get out more.
Can I
need to get out more.
Can I paint a picture that Denise's shoe collection is?
It's not extensive. It's curated.
I wasn't going to say anything about the quantity of them.
Okay.
I was going to say that they are extraordinary. There are a number of them. But you wear them around the house every now and again.
Yeah, they are of a piece. But I think though, having a floral stall in Paris.
Sorry about that.
The slurping, no slurping.
No, I have to because I got a sore lip. So I can't put my lip in the tea.
I can't. We can't even go there. But you know what? There is something interesting that in talking about the flowers that actually connects to what we were going to talk about today, and I did not anticipate that happening.
Rightio. Yes.
And that is, without support, things just get all gangly, and it's only the supported ones that can reach the sun. It's like that with students.
think you're
What do you think?
I like it.
It's a good metaphor, right?
It's a great metaphor.
So I propose we change a little bit of what we were going to talk about.
You can't do this to me right now. I'm going to have another slurp.
No slurping. There you go. See, you were... Oh, I just squealed. There you go. You were able to do that quietly. So I'm thinking about two things. So our topic for today was about how homeopathy, sort of the state of play in homeopathy in America and around the world. We were only going to talk about America, really, but I had a conversation with someone who teaches at a naturopathic college in London yesterday morning about clinical training, and we talked about the state of play in America versus the state of play in other countries. And as usual, people look at Americans like, you people is wild. There was a little bit of that.
There is a lot of that.
Yeah, there is a lot of that. And I'm interested in that conversation because it's really hard not to sort of gasp at behaviors that could be harmful. But at the same time, we want to respect how people come to homeopathy. And there's no like guidebook out there. There are no like rules and laws. People are finding it on their own and falling in love with a modality that really speaks to their understanding of the world and how it works because it's based on the laws of the universe. So it resonates with people like from all backgrounds, which is pretty amazing. But I think part of what sort of freaks me out a little bit, and this really came up yesterday in that conversation, what freaks me out a little bit is that people come to something with passion and can inadvertently find themselves in over their heads in ways that could cause problems. And we got to figure out as a community how to nurture sort of this acceptance and support and even tolerance in some ways. Like we can't become factioned and fractured because somebody wants to be right, you know? I mean, I had something, sorry, can I give one example of something that happened? Someone rendered an accusation about me for my talk at the Joint American Homeopathy Conference last year.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
And claimed that I said things and then in my talk and that it was exclusionary and that I talked about people, I don't know, like all sorts of things. And so they have a review process for that. And so the executive director of the NCH and the president of the board watched my whole talk. And they came to me and they said, you know, a complaint was filed, but you didn't actually say any of the things of which you were accused. And I was like, oh my gosh, no, but that's kind of, and the thing is, I didn't assume someone lied. I assumed someone didn't understand fully. And I have to take responsibility for that if something was said that someone felt excluded from, right? Because it means that we need more explanation. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, the story makes sense because it happens all the time. I mean, the way that I would describe it is that just people hear what they want to hear.
There's confirmation bias a little bit.
Oh, I mean, okay, you want to call it that? I call it, in the old days, we call it telephone, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And
there is that.
And people say things about you or a talk or a whatever that may or may not bear any relationship to the truth. And that's just the reality of it. You can't do anything about it. But what you can do is you can be cautious with what one says or contextualize really clearly what you're saying. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I mean, in saying the classroom situations that I've been in of late, you know, I've kind of it's been repeated back to me what I said yesterday, and that's not what I said yesterday.
I remember,
and I know that because I don't say anything that I don't believe.
Yeah.
And if I am making stuff up, then I say I'm making stuff up.
Oh, I do that all the time. I say, okay, if you're putting this in your notes, say, Denise, this is something that.
Yeah. I mean, there's you know, evidence and then there's opinion, and I let people know if it's an opinion, But on
the other side of that, I guess where I was going, and I don't want to make this about certainly don't want to make this about what was said to me, but it was the
You tell
lesson.
me who said it, I'll go and beat him up. I don't like it when someone smack talks to you.
I'm from Philly. I can take care of myself.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Look at those guns.
Thank you.
Damn.
So
I mean, by the way, I just realised what I said. I did mean Denise's biceps.
yeah,
That's what I did mean.
I mean,
They're pretty impressive.
yeah, yoga arms. No, but what my takeaway was more. I was thinking, well, what can I do to be a positive change as opposed to
Well,
kind of furthering a divisive narrative?
yeah. I mean, the bottom line, at the heart of it, at the very, very heart of it, I believe, if we go down or at least up to where something which is complex could be fixed, that would change it. I believe that the same thing that happens in homeopathy happens in yoga. It happens
totally.
in psychotherapy,
Yeah.
and it happens in massage therapy or bodywork, broader bodywork therapies. Right. And, those are adjacent to what we do. And so if you think about it, if there's, divisiveness or different schools, it kind of makes sense when there's no regulation, right? Now, that word is, I mean, even the look on your face when I said the word regulation,
right?
That's a divisive word. But there's regulation in the conventional therapies. There are standards of practice and standards of education in the conventional healthcare professions, and then the ones that I mentioned, to an extent, there are some, and then there are not.
Yeah.
Right. See, in naturopathy, for example, you'd say, well, that's a regulated healthcare profession, correct?
Yep.
Except there are non-licensed, non-accredited schools producing non-licensed naturopaths in some parts of, say, the US or around the world. And fine. I think, it takes it would be a pretty tough environment where that became, really problematic. But that immediately creates division within the profession. It creates division and confusion amongst the public.
Right.
Because you're a naturopath and you're a naturopath. I don't understand what's the difference between the two. I have to work that out. Why can't you tell me? Or why don't I know? And to an extent, I reckon it's you can't have your cake and eat it too kind of situation.
I call that cake and pie.
Cake and pie?
Mm-hmm.
I want cake and pie?
Cake and pie.
Happily, I've never ever been in that situation unless it was a meat pie and an empanada.
Uh-huh.
But
you love a meat pie.
I did have a cake made out of salami once. Are you okay?
Okay, sorry. What?
Yeah. It was... I had a cake presented to me because the people that were there knew that I didn't like cake.
Right.
So they made it out of salami.
It wasn't cake, though. Was it like a salami sandwich?
Salami in the shape of a cake. Different German meats. Different German cuts in the shape of a cake. Anywho.
That is funny.
That's also irrelevant. But you see that, as I've said, I remember... it's actually the first time I met Todd Hoover. I was teaching in India at Liga.
Explain Todd Hoover.
Todd Hoover, Dr. Todd Hoover.
He is a homeopath from here in Philadelphia. He was actually my first homeopath in 1994.
Well, Todd teaches with us.
And he teaches with us.
Yeah.
Yep, he's a medical doctor. And he is very much involved with the pharmacopoeia.
The HBUS.
That's right.
When I first met him, I think was whenever I taught at Liga in India. Mm-hmm. And so Liga is the Liga Medicorium, the Latin. It's the organization that runs the doctors.
International medical homeopaths.
Yeah.
I think my job is to add explanation for you.
Just translate. But can you do it a bit quicker? Because I got short-term memory loss, so I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, go ahead, hurry.
No, because what I did this talk, which I actually wanted to turn into...
A movie.
No, a series of blogs, probably. Oh. on the Baker's Dozen challenges, on the 13 challenges, significant challenges that we face in homeopathy education.
Oh, wow.
And it was a kick-ass talk. I put a lot of work into it. And
what year was this?
2011, before I met you.
Okay.
I think. Oh,
no, that's when we met.
Is that might have been 2010 in that case.
Okay.
But what was I going to say? So what I said was, there's no profession like it. I know, I've got it back again because Todd is in it. So there's no profession like ours because in the context, I'm looking at a big audience of Indian trained physicians that went to medical school.
Right.
And they sat in the classroom alongside of their conventional medical colleagues in anatomy, physiology, pathophysiology, microbiology, blah, 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 doing pre-med.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to material
Like
medical.
a lot of naturopaths.
Like a lot of naturopaths. And so I compared the model of education of Indian trained physicians,
Right.
homeopaths,
Yeah.
and naturopathic homeopaths,
Mm-hmm.
and then compared that with Western trained, and I used the model of Britain and the Faculty of Homeopathy,
Yeah.
where you're a medical doctor and then you're a bit left of centre and slightly kooky,
Yeah.
and you have a moment, in practice, and you go, oh, I can't do this anymore, there's got to be something else.
Yeah.
Oh, what's that shiny thing?
Uh-huh.
I'll study homeopathy. And that's a totally different educational model.
Yeah.
And so that's almost like a clip-on at the top of this bed of medicine.
And a lot of those docs.
Can I keep running?
Oh, go
Because
ahead.
I'm going
Yeah.
to forget about it.
Okay. Yeah.
Hold on to that. Because that's so interesting that the modern Western trained medical doctors mostly find homeopathy after disillusionment and years of Western medicine. That's not the Indian experience.
Right.
Where they're all 19.
And South Africa as well, right?
Was
Some?
Yeah, well, that's interesting because then I talked about that because that's closer to the Australian system back in 2010 when I was running the department at Endeavour, where we
Endeavour College, which is a college of natural medicine that included homeopathy as well as other
you got to translate
modalities.
quicker
I'm
than
just.
that. You got to come on, sharpen up.
I'm on it. Keep going. Keep up.
Which is where you study. It's not too dissimilar in a way to the Indian model, but nevertheless, you've got. It's not a pre-med.
It's
course,
a biomed.
but it's a biomed base.
Prerequisites.
Yeah, the first year is history of medicine, anatomy, physiology, pathophysiology, blah blah, and then the foundations of communicating.
Right.
And then on top of that, then you got your naturopathic information or homeopathic information or nutritional information. And then you got your degree. Then you got your degree in health science. And so, and then you got your professional homeopath model, which is, let's say, the model that you and I began with, which is, I'm going to weekend school, right? How different is that? Suddenly we're having the same conversation and you've got a 20-year-old going to university in Mumbai, or you've got a hippie.
A 40-year-old, because back in the day, it was mostly older.
Yeah, a 45-year-old, mostly female
Yep.
Group going to...
Third career, not even sure they're going to practice a lot of the time.
Exactly.
It was a different model.
And you go to 10 weekends a year. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, do you remember that?
Who could forget it?
And then, so what you've got is a landscape of education which is unparalleled. There's not a profession on the planet that has that.
No.
And it comes from local jurisdictional rules and regulations about how to run schools. And the product from all of those schools is supposed to be the same. And it's not.
And it's totally not. And I want to add two more things to the basis that you're building here.
And then I want to get back to Todd Rowe. Todd Hoover.
But so one of the things is that if we go back to how homeopathy education started here in America, you've got the Allentown Academy, which was, what was the year? 1835.
In German.
Taught in German to medical doctors, already trained allopathic medical doctors who were taking on homeopathy in German. Then that closes, and then the Homeopathic Medical College of Pennsylvania opens, and
teaching young men.
Yes. Most of which started with allopathic education, and then it became full on. You got all your ultimately. It becomes you get all your medical education. And, we talked about this before because this is part of my thesis, but in looking at the sort of what education looked like here in the United States in the 19th century, but there was a lot of medicine. They learned surgery. They did tests. They were doing autopsies, post-mortem dissections to understand pathophysiology. Now, Hahnemann had opinions about this and how much of it was appropriate, but I think it's also important to say that there was meant to be an underlayment of medical education, even when you get up to Kent's time, right, at the turn of the 20th century. So James Tyler Kent, who was trained first as a regular physician, then as an eclectic physician, then grabs his Swedenborgian suitcase and throws it into the homeopathy ring, right? And even though it changed homeopathy somewhat, and even though there were plenty of sort of out-of-the-box thinkers engaged in homeopathy, I think Samuel Swan would be one of them. He seems to have a little, I think it's early, well, no, he has some anthroposophical stuff in his suitcase, I think. But anyway, all that being said is that somehow the model of homeopathy training that exists in the professional sector, which from AHE's standpoint, Academy of Homeopathy Education, we have 20 to 25% licensed medical professionals in our program, but the rest are people from all different backgrounds.
Right.
Yeah?
Right.
Go on. Sorry, I just wanted to add that because I think it's important to sort of say that
Well, as I was contextualizing all of that,
Yeah.
and talking about the way in which homeopathy is spread around the world, and the way in which homeopaths are trained around the world,
Yeah.
educated,
Yeah.
well, trained actually.
Yeah.
One thing I'd say about Kent is, remember, his was a postgrad course.
it was, well, Kent's course, sure, but I'm
Yeah.
saying even with what he brought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm having so Todd Hoover is there.
In India. We're back in India.
Yeah, we're back in India. Keep up.
2011.
2011. And one of the things that, he said to me afterwards was, that was interesting. But he also said that, there's another piece to it as well. And that the piece was the other challenge that I was speaking about, and that was not only the diversity, but the inability to deal with the fact that we're in the 21st century and dealing with digital times, or dealing with the rise of the digital age, and
in 2011 that meant something very different than it did in 2020.
Oh my God, absolutely, yeah, totally. So to round that out, one of the things that we're faced with, that leaders are faced with, if you're in any position of leadership within homeopathy now, you're swimming in the waters of the I just keep calling it the digital age, but there's probably a better language for it. And you're looking at what's in front of you. The water's kind of murky.
Yeah.
Imagine you're floating in a river and it's a dirty river. So you're dealing with the challenges of your immediate environment. The phone goes, the power goes out, the whatever, and but from a broad perspective, no leader or no set of leaders has been able to get together and say, can we sort this out? Now, you and I have experienced the world of homeopathy in its breadth and depth.
Sure.
We've had the opportunity to speak to, medical and non-licensed professional homeopaths and teach them, and so we've seen that breadth and diversity. And, obviously at the same time, before we knew each other, going, how can we sustain this, or what's the solution? And then now, whatever it is we're 8 years in. Are we 8 years in?
You're 8 years in. I had those years before that.
Right. And we're 8 years into, I'm 8 years into the AHE adventure. Mm-hmm. And we've been able to, for the most part, have super mum home educators, flight engineers, bankers sitting in the same room and in the classroom,
mm-hmm.
and midwives, acupuncturists,
specialty nurse practitioners, medical docs,
medical docs, and
interestingly, you can't predict who's going to be who's going to have the most stellar outcomes. I think being medically trained does not automatically guarantee.
But even that's interesting, because what you just said there is quite a statement. Because in a way, I've heard folks in medical school say our job is not to teach you to be a great doctor. Our job is to teach you to be a safe doctor. And so what you're talking about the stellar student, but we could also talk about the safe student, the safe graduate.
Yeah.
And so this is the crazy landscape we've got, and let's add into that then what are the other recent developments? I suppose COVID has come along.
AI.
Artificial intelligence is a reality. We've had, in our own classes this year, we've had our first AI assignment handed in that we were able to identify. And then we've got, that sort of protocol, different shaped education offering that's peppered around the countryside as well. This is the other thing, though. The other thing, sorry, now going back to Todd, because I remember that was the first time I said, well, what about your education, mate? How did you learn homeopathy? And I said, I went to Paul Herskey.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, well, that's an example of the medical doctor that clips on or puts on top of the pyramid a body of homeopathy information, and somehow, hopefully, integrates it.
Yeah, Paul Herskey and his wife Amy run the NESH, the New England School of Homeopathy, and it's only for licensed professionals, right?
Yeah,
is that the case? And they're naturopaths.
But with a big focus on homeopathy.
Oh, yeah, totally. But with that background, I happen to be a major fan of Amy's. I just think the world of her.
Ditto. I'll tell you about her. I did this piece of research once. Have I told you this story?
I have no idea where you're going with this.
Well, I think this is in keeping with the ethos of our
of our podcast. Is like we learn things we didn't know before.
Correct. Amy Rothenberg. Once I was doing this piece of research, and I thought to myself, there's something totally wrong with homeopathy. What is it? There's all of these cured cases, all of these experts saying, do this because here's my beautiful case. Mm-hmm. And there's a serious scientific problem with that.
Sure.
And mainly around bias. And so I did an experiment, and I did a trawl. It must have taken me probably a rainy Easter. But it was...
always with the rainy Easter.
It's always raining at Easter.
Anyway.
And I looked
in the southern hemisphere, you're talking about.
I looked for one case where the author who said, and pulsatilla was the remedy, which, often they say cured the case or whatever in the old and new literature. There's only one author with one case that says, oh, and in addition, they were also doing this lifestyle plus on this diet and da-da-da-da-da. And to me, that was really critical because it's something I know I've said to you before, which is 94% of my clients were also getting other treatments,
well,
therapies.
And she's a naturopath, so it would make sense.
But she's the only person that ever,
acknowledges,
said, in the soup that went towards a curative situation in a clinical setting. Yeah. There were these other things as well. For me, that's the only honest author.
She's all that in a bag of chips. Anybody who's not familiar with her, look for her writings. She had cancer some years ago, and she wrote about her journey and her articles. She's probably got a whole Substack by now. She really is just. She's a bright light. She is one of the nicest people. I look forward every year to seeing her at the national conference. I couldn't possibly say enough good things about her. And she's quite a dancer. She's fun on the dance floor.
Oh, yeah. So
you were talking about sort of this idea of doctors who have homeopathy education as a clip-on, which I really like that. And I want to finish up a thought I was having about some of the folks, some of the docs that I've met who have come to homeopathy, and many of them in the faculty. Yeah, because you were talking about the faculty of homeopathy in the UK, and there's quite a culture of. What do I want to say? I was going to say eccentricity, but it's not quite that.
Oh, it is.
But Is that fair to say? All right.
You're talking about the British Faculty of
Well,
Homeopathy?
I mean, they're. I think.
Firstly, they're English, so they're eccentric. And secondly, they're homeopaths, so they're
I know.
double
I guess all
eccentric.
those things go. I don't see that anymore
Some
because
of them
I'm just
are
a part of
able
it.
to.
But there's a lot of sort of anthroposophy or interesting interpretations of posology, or we were talking to somebody recently who just puts all the potencies in a cup and says they're going to get what they need from this. I mean, that's there a lot of talk about Paracelsian alchemy, the Fibonacci potencies and all of these things, which are, I mean, at best homeopathy adjacent. I mean, there's just a thread, but there's a way in which I think some of the folks that are adding on are adding lots of things. And I'm always curious about the ones who like have homeopathy just like pure and simple, as opposed to sort of thinking about how to use the principles of homeopathy in conjunction with other modalities.
Right. So can we get to what I think is the heart of the matter? And
Sure, because I have no idea where you're going.
Well, then listen
I'm
up.
going to listen.
All right. So having laid out the fact that we're diverse,
Yeah.
crazy diverse, and that the other part of it is that for the most part, many of those educational opportunities are not necessarily educationally that sound from a boring educational taxonomy perspective.
Right.
Right? I'll leave that to one side. And the reason for saying that is because the first class in every school is usually about the law of similars. Right?
Yeah.
Well, that's an advanced concept. And as was hammered home to me in very public settings, that one does not teach advanced concepts in a foundational
I know you.
lecture.
You've talked about this a number of times. I'm not sure that I'm fully in agreement with you on that, because I don't think of it as an advanced concept. I think of it as the foundational principle from which everything else stems. So
but I'm not attached to that example. What I'm just saying is that most schools get their taxonomy completely wrong. They ask for advanced application.
Well, what did you learn on your first day? I'll never forget. Sulfur. Misha teaching sulfur. I mean, could you imagine? That is, how could you even wrap your head around it? Now, I get why
Well, it was an entertaining hour and a half, but
absolutely.
I took no notes. Did you take notes?
Of course I took notes, please. I have Hermione Granger disease. Yes, and I still have them.
So my point is that people arrive at homeopathy. They grab, they go to a website. They are able to access pieces of homeopathy education through their own research and exploration. And at some point they'll hold.
Yeah.
And whoever they hold on to early on, is it going to be an accredited homeopathy school in North America? Or is it going to be a charismatic dude that lives in a yurt and holds on? Is it going to be protocols and holds on?
Yeah.
Are they going to arrive at homeopathy through hearing their neighbour talk about freedom and go to Americans for Homeopathy Choice and get and dive into the homeopathic world in that way? You see, in medicine, in other more structured healthcare fields, and it's not about creating apples. It's not about creating the same, but there's a pathway, and the pathway is accompanied with research, and it's accompanied with the application of standards, and there's a depth and a seriousness about it, and it creates professional identity and formation. And professional identity and formation is missing. There's no conversation in our world about the skills and qualities and attributes of a homeopath.
No, and I will say that...
And a professional identity of what a homeopath is.
And when we've tried to have that conversation, I mean, we've basically gotten egged. I mean, I have people who are, like, absolutely opposed to having the conversation.
Well, I mean, my 6 years at Achina was solely about...
Achina being the accrediting body. This is what happens when you finish graduate school, where everything you write, your thesis advisor says, explanation. Achina is the accrediting body for schools in North America, so in the U.S. and Canada, so the accrediting body.
My 6 years was all about trying to raise the standards, get everyone in alignment about the veracity and the truth of what I am saying about identity, learning outcomes, about educational standards.
And your experience was?
No one's interested. They don't care.
It wasn't just that no one's interested. You're being kind. I mean, you had high blood pressure to the point where I thought your head was going to blow off, and people would scream at you.
Well, no one's interested. No.
It's not just that people aren't interested. I'm going to challenge that, because I think that there's a lot of... I think people get fearful that they're going to lose their slice of pie or cake or salami cake or whatever the hell it is. And instead of being open to, this is a time when we in homeopathy have an opportunity to really do it. Yeah, I'm going to go back to my Victor Hugo quote. There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And I think that part of what is happening, so like if we look at everything through a positive lens, we can say that there's a cultural zeitgeist around the shifts in medicine, where even people who are deeply embedded in the medical system are seeing some of the not flaws, but some of the limitations, right? So like we get into the biomedical model in the 19th century, we deconstruct everything down to the smallest possible parts, and we get there and it's like, okay, some of that is really amazing. When I think about my dear friend who was a child who had a brain tumor, who through aggressive allopathic interventions and a little homeopathy on the side, I will say, but is not just alive and well, but thriving, and is just this beautiful, incredible human. Right? I mean, to me,
true, isn't it?
Right? And so when I got the phone call when they were in the ambulance going, to Boston Children's with this new diagnosis, I was really happy that there was going to be, this incredible set of therapeutics available to him to help. And they did help. Not without, kind of collateral damage. But at the end of the day, a lot came out of, the advances in medicine. By the same token, treating chronic disease, autoimmune diseases, right? These are things for which the tools aren't necessarily, they might extend one's lifespan, but are they improving health? Probably not, right? Turning off the immune system, not a comprehensive strategy for increasing health, right? So like, this is where homeopathy comes in, because it's what we do really well. And I think, it's a tough needle to thread, right? So anyway, I came to this statement around this idea that the zeitgeist in medicine is that there are limitations to the reductionistic medical paradigm that got embraced and a lot of money put into from the from the late 19th century onward, to the point where we are so financially invested in these systems and infrastructures that it's really hard to get out of. And, thinking about, well, let me finish this thought. So we've got a system that doesn't necessarily work. And we've got mandates to go through, a set of diagnostics and then interventions for which people know there's going to be, there are going to be potential complications. And so people are saying, I don't want that. I need something else. Or they've gone through the system already and they've come out. How many, clients in my practice, I see mostly complex autoimmune stuff, which, by the way, Hahnemann knew exactly what to do with. He just called it developed psora. We call it autoimmune disease. But when I see these people, they've been through the ringer. These kids with Crohn's disease don't come to the homeopath first because they've wound up in the emergency room, losing liters of blood in their stool, or with, intense pain or inability to, assimilate food and grow and so forth. Right? So what we're seeing then is, this idea that the time has come, because the brokenness of the system, the parts of the current paradigm that aren't working, those are things that a well-trained homeopath can solve. Emphasis on well-trained. You cannot solve chronic disease with protocols. You can't. You cannot solve chronic disease if you're a doctor who has gone through a couple of weekends and has learned to basically do the equivalent of protocols. You can't solve chronic disease if you have not learned the full breadth and expanse of homeopathy and follow cases to see the complexity of the unfolding over time. It's impossible. And so this educational system, right?
Ours?
Yeah. So there's one more piece to put in before getting to back to where you were, and that is, I think part of what's happening in this sort of movement for homeopathy is that we can see it as the panacea to all of the problems. This is why people fall in love with it. This is why when you have your first miracle moment of taking a homeopathic remedy and going like, oh, the angels sing, and you're like, oh my gosh, the world is different. You watch those kids, even just a little chamomile, for a baby with colic. It's miraculous. But those little moments don't translate into solving the big problem. But people get on board, they fall in love with it, they start buying books, then they start practicing. I'm just practicing on my friends and family. Just because they're your friends and family doesn't mean that you need less knowledge or experience in order to help them. You know what I mean? And there's risk, like you said, who the safest doctors as opposed to the best doctors, or who are the safest students as opposed to the most, successful students. So I feel like all these things are sort of congealing. Like there's this love affair with homeopathy that's happening primarily because you've got people who recognize the laws of nature in play, or the laws of the universe. I mean, homeopathy is founded on universal truth. We talked about it in the last podcast. That's what, Hahnemann's explanations of the law of similars, whether it be in nature, the moon's, the luminous Jupiter, or whether it be in disease, measles solving a sty, whatever. It really does, it works, whether you believe it or not, because it is in alignment with the laws of nature. Okay, great. So that is one basis for love. Another can be people are freaked out by what's happening in some facets of the medical system.
But we need to tease this out, because there are internal drivers, there are internal reasons that people are drawn to homeopathy, exactly as you said,
Yeah.
and others. And then there's the external factors, the brokenness of the system.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So, and can I go back to the conversations that I've had with international folks recently? So just a short little bypass here, because I think the problems in America are not the problems in the rest of the world.
Yeah, got it.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you started out by talking about India and all this. So about, I forget if it was about 3 years ago or so. So I sit on a couple of advocacy groups, one of which you're involved with. And a couple of years ago, one of the advocacy groups, we were talking about risk management, as I'm constantly harping on, because I don't want to see America fall into what happened in Australia, which we can talk about another time. But so a few of us spent a summer making phone calls to colleagues around the world to talk about risks, real and perceived, so that we could be prepared if something were to occur, that we would already have developed a network of conversation of people who are thinking about not just risk that comes like in the press, like happened in the UK, or through sort of the press and the government and bad practice that happened in Australia, but for like all the things, or like the FDA in America, but actually looking at all of the issues. And so what was sort of shocking but not surprising was when I made my calls to my friends and colleagues in various parts of the world, and I explained to them what was happening in America, like this home prescribing phenomenon of people, treating cancer and Parkinson's disease. And, I did a PowerPoint on 24 hours in the land of social media, looking at like 3 or 4 of the consumer sites and pulling out the most bizarre recommendations that people were giving and case management advice. Like, it's unbelievable. And I showed this to people, and they were aghast, and they were laughing like you Americans are something else. No, this doesn't happen anywhere else. People aren't creating dispensaries to hide behind, a perceived firewall to be able to get remedies out that are unregulated. Now, I'm not going to say good, bad, or otherwise about this, because we all know that there are times when you need to get something that you can't get. But cottage industry is built not around best practices as a way to utilize a modality, right, in sort of on another trajectory. It just doesn't happen in other places. People were absolutely like aghast, that this is what's happening in America. So I want to point that out. And yesterday, for example, I was having a conversation with someone who works at a naturopathic college in the UK. They want to do some clinical training with us. And I was describing, they were asking about how people are getting education. What does education look like in the United States? And I was describing sort of the sort of liberty that people will take. And choosing the word liberty is a good reminder, because that word equals freedom to people. And in America, it's like, well, you're trying to take away my freedom to take care of my own child. I just want to be very clear. That's not what I'm saying at all. I am not saying people should not have the liberty or freedom to treat their own family in the way that they see fit. I'm talking about a completely different phenomenon, which is this love of homeopathy that is now presenting itself in ways that could wind up doing harm. And going back to what we were talking about in the beginning, how the ways in which we need to, the rising tide that floats all boats, right? We need to have the conversations so that everyone is understanding what we do and what homeopathy is about. Because a medicine that can bring a person back from, bring a person out of a coma, or stop a heart attack in progress, or get rid of, a septic condition, or unravel the complexities of, multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's, can not at the same time be taken with impunity without any rules around it. Like, those two things can't exist in the same universe. It's not candy, right? And I don't mean to say that to be opinionated. It's really, I'm hoping that what I'm doing is putting a bow around what you've been saying, which is we've evolved in such a way that, we've sort of gotten far away in terms of education, to the point where the end product is sometimes not recognizable to
the end product being the
homeopath.
The homeopath, yeah.
If they're educated at all. I guess that's the other part of it.
Yeah, it's interesting, because
right?
I realized when you were talking about that, I was thinking that another attempt, and I have to say a failed attempt at some leadership around this, was that standards and competencies process, that just where the guardrails, so an acknowledgement, so embedded in that process was.
Can you describe what the process, it was, standards and competencies, the document and its history?
The certifying body for professional homeopaths in the US is called the CHC, and the accrediting body that accredits schools is called a CHINA. And they rely on a document, there's an agreed document that both contribute to. And I was the head of the steering committee that went about a revision of those standards, because the last time that they were looked at was a decade ago, and learning technologies have arrived, and the use of technologies have arrived.
And plus, along with them, the disbursement of education.
And education changes, plus a whole lot of developments within health and healthcare.
Yeah.
Since the last time those standards were revised. And so I began a process of revising those, and embedded, and it wasn't just me, but in terms of guiding that process, what we did was we embedded an acknowledgement that there are folks that come in the front door of homeopathy from domestic use of homeopathy, and what we did is we laid down guardrails, right? So if you're a user of homeopathy and you're passionate, just like you were talking about, then knock yourself out. Fantastic. Give the chamomilla, da-da-da-da-da.
But here are the bee sting.
But there are the guardrails.
Right.
Stop. Don't go here.
Yeah.
For that, for, say, simple acute prescribing, you need this level of training, this level of education. Before then, hitting the world of chronic disease, and these are the guardrails as you're learning that process and case management and all the rest of it. And then, you know, it was something quite beautiful, actually.
And what happened?
I can't even speak about it.
No, you have to.
Well, I mean, it's again, I think the vested interests within our community that saw it as removing the pie.
Yeah.
Or
it was a threat. It was perceived. It was
threat,
seen as a threat
without understanding the critical importance of it. And I think, you know, and then they changed the rules about how the process was then going to run. And as soon as, you know, there's an agreed process about how we will review standards and how we will then go to public comment and then how we will revise and then write them. As soon as the rules change within that process, then that process is deeply flawed.
Yeah.
And so I stepped away. And
well, you didn't just step away.
Anyway, doesn't matter.
Oh, but I think it does, because I think, look, we're willing to go out on a limb and say we want the community to have conversation. And I think that there are enough people who love homeopathy who are interested in learning about the nooks and crannies and the intricacies so that we can have a healthy and vibrant community with longevity. And I think you and I are both committed to inclusivity in, you know, I mean, looking at our classroom, you know, inclusivity from every perspective, be it where people come from in their educational process to what cultural background they come from. How can we take all of this and bring it together? And the only thing that we ask for is for respect for one another and for respect for homeopathy. And we take the do no harm seriously. And I think, you know, in AHE, we also ask people in our community to give back, to serve on boards, to be a part of the larger conversation. And not just to be a part of the conversation, but to listen so that we can understand different people's positions. And I would like to, and I think it's really important because you're being quiet about something which you are one of the few people in the homeopathy world that took the time to get a PhD in education, in the intersection of homeopathy, or in education in integrative medicine and learning technologies. And along the way, I mean, you did a research PhD, you were required to get into peer-reviewed publications to demonstrate that you understand the process, you know? And you also left sort of the world of being a homeopathy teacher for a little while to focus on building infrastructure in homeopathy education to learn more about that. And you had some hard knocks along the way. So you took on a position of leadership in homeopathy, not paid, that took hours and hours and hours of your time. And to say that you were not treated with respect would be a huge understatement. So you won't say it, but I will say it on your behalf, because I never heard you speak with bias against people. You were accused of sharing knowledge with me. The downstream effect was, you know, we were told that AHE was only successful because you were giving me some secrets, which I'll take umbrage with because I can hold my own. I don't need any secrets on what to do. You do your best work. You show up constantly and work. That's how you become successful. So I think, you know, I would rather, Al, that you at least acknowledge that you are here for the community and the experience that you have gained and the tirelessness with which you have shown up to lead committees, the steering committee, to, you know, to support homeopathy education and accreditation and to bring it forward was met with not just resistance, but with acts of malice in some ways. And I don't think that it's appropriate. And you know what? And that's all that needs to be said about it. But from that position, right? Because if anybody's listening, we're 53 minutes into this. If you're still listening, it means you actually care about the future of homeopathy. And what I would encourage all of us to do is to get together to talk, but mostly to listen. Right? That's what we do. Our advocacy groups that meet, you know, monthly in the larger settings. And then, you know, some of us are meeting with total regularity to talk about these, you know, these issues and to think, how can we move forward together to draw on each other's strengths to bring homeopathy forward. If we fracture, or if we choose to not reach our highest potential, but to go low, we're not going to succeed, right?
No, that is true.
So, sorry, that was a rant on Alastair's behalf, but I watched you from the sidelines, and I watched how hard and you're like unbelievable in terms of how you can moderate these difficult discussions. I'm impressed by it. I'm Sicilian, like I struggle with that, but you really do that. You do it beautifully. And so I think, as we kind of come to the last part of this conversation, let's think about what it looks like going forward, and where we were actually going to start was we were going to do a reflection on the year at AHE and sort of the ways in which integrating people from a variety of backgrounds, both in terms of their homeopathy training and their sort of experience in the world, fosters a robust learning environment, right? And one of the ways that can happen is, helping people through kind of repetition of knowledge so that everyone can sort of loosen the grip on whatever sort of the love that they come in with for homeopathy that might be related to something totally different. Like if you come in from sort of understanding homeopathy through the land of protocols, it's like, okay, well, what's the best thing that we can take from that? These people have mad acute skills. They know the keynotes and confirmatories of remedies. That's great. Just now need to attach it to philosophy. People who are coming in who found homeopathy through sort of a spiritual realm, like it answered a question about the laws of the nature, and for them it became a way to sort of bring in their seekers' wishes. Yeah. Sometimes people come, and we don't see this as much with, we have a lot of folks of faith who come to the homeopathy community, and they sort of, this isn't a thing that they need to grapple with. In fact, it's almost the opposite. It's like, wait, is homeopathy spirituality? No. But for people maybe who weren't, who aren't still adjacent to the tradition they were raised with, or maybe they weren't raised with some of the things that anchor you to rituals of the year or rituals of, of life or the miracles of the universe, it's like they find it in what's almost like a religious way. And there are some, there's some ways in which homeopathy gets interpreted that's like this whole spiritual thing. You kind of have to then bring that back in to say, okay, that is absolutely beautiful. And along with those laws, understanding the laws of the universe, now we dial it into what are the medical realities of dealing with these problems, right? Like that's kind of, I don't know, that's how we learn together. Right? We try to take the best from it. And I think that's where I think we have to do going forward, right? We can't judge each other. Like how could you ever judge a person for something they didn't know? That's terrible. That's like abusive, right? To say, oh, well, you're wrong. Well, how could you be wrong if you've never been taught that? Yeah?
Yeah.
So
I'm listening.
Yeah. So I think that, the ways that we go forward, we've got to really have the conversations about the future of homeopathy, and we need to help each other, So each of us has different strengths that we bring to, let's say, the education world, So we get calls from lots of people around the world to engage with our clinical training because we're doing something that isn't done. And the amount of clinical training that we offer and sort of the depth of it is something that our international colleagues are coming to us and saying, hey, like we want to be a part of this. And it's interesting that in America, there's a resistance to that. There are some schools who feel like just showing videos of cured cases from a decade or more ago is going to be sufficient to train someone. So in America, there's sort of almost let's push that it's easier than it is. But what if we came together and said, well, what if some of the programs that have developed something, let them help. We've offered to help. We'll help anybody who wants help. We've got HHN, like anybody who wants to be involved in the clinical side of things, like we've got a spot for it. And then there are other schools that are really delving into sort of the development of the individual. How do we become a good homeopath? Yeah. What if that became something that, people work together on and like allow people to rise to their level of expertise instead of saying one good, one bad, let me hide my cheese and I'm going to spit at the people who I feel are in opposition to me.
Hiding the cheese?
Hiding the cheese.
Is that an expression?
Yeah. Like protecting your cheese. Why, you're hungry?
I am hungry, but I also had a flatmate once that would get a block of cheese
Oh, right.
and cut it in half and then hide it in a room, and it would come out on a Thursday.
Yeah.
Very strange person. Hiding the cheese.
Yeah. So let's not hide cheese.
All right. I think that's the moral of today.
Moral of today. Don't hide your cheese.
Do not hide the cheese.
Because we need to do this together.
Well, you and I are doing it together.
Do you know that I once had a nickname which was Susie Cream Cheese? Speaking of cheese.
Really?
Yeah, because I like to be positive about things. And I think you can hold a positive attitude while problem solving, like seeing the problems and not being willing to just take it on the chin, but rather to speak the truth. You know, Hahnemann says a life of ease ain't going to help you in the pursuit of homeopathy. And we've got the chance. Like, now's our time. This is it, right? So imagine how much further we can get if we do it together than if people start with this cheese business. Right? No cheese business.
No more cheese.
That's it.
All right. See you, folks.
Let's do it again.
Take it easy.
Have a good one.
Bye.
No cheese business.
AHE is changing the face of homeopathy education by raising the bar through rigorous academics and unparalleled clinical training delivered live through the soulful use of cutting-edge technology. AHE prepares its students to become fully rounded homeopathic practitioners from anywhere in the world. Apply today at ahe.online.